it's unfathomable how terrible it is. It's really hard to stomach any of this. And so now she admits to killing the children. And now the issue is whether or not she'll sort of spend the rest of her life in a regular prison or in a psychiatric institute, because if she's determined that she wasn't criminally responsible because of postpartum psychosis.
Friends, let us consider that acuity is the refined clarity of thought and perception which enables one to discern subtle truths.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the ACUITY Podcast, Politics and Culture. So glad that you're here with us. I'm the host, Dr. Lavranos of ACUITY Medical Law, and with me, my lovely, charming co-host, Amy, who is also our Chief of Communications. So happy that you are here with us, Amy, and we've got a great week this week, some really cool topics that are kind of like exactly where our specialties, background in healthcare and in law kind of intertwine. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. Sometimes there's so much going on in the news every week. It's hard to figure out what exactly we should talk about. But this week, it's like there's so much that has to do with medical legal issues. We should focus on that. It's right in our wheelhouse. But maybe before we get into that, I'll ask how your summer is going.
Oh, yeah. It's been great. We are cruising at the firm. Finally, everything feels like it's kind of in order. I think, probably people who tune in regularly will see a big change in the demeanor because life has been really good. I think by September, we are going to be like firing at all cylinders. And apart from the work side of things, also, it's been fun otherwise. Kids have been great, some really nice parties. A lot of my extended family is visiting, and I love that. How about you?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's been busy. It's my kids are kind of in summer camp, but my oldest is home sometimes. And then I'm sort of trying to work from home while he's here, which is, I'm trying to just embrace it and enjoy it and be like, it's okay. I'll work late at night when the kids are sleeping so that I can spend more time being present with him during the day. And I swear to God, I've heard so much about Pokemon and gems and minerals. That's like but it's partly going in one ear and out the other. I think 10 times a day, it's like, what's your favorite Pokemon? I'm like, it's
a kid's favorite
Vulpix.
Right. For kids' favorite person. What's your favorite? Blank. I get like, what's your favorite princess? I'm like, well, today or like right now, or, I have to change up the answers or why I feel that way. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes from the look at this, and then they do some sort of jump, and you have to be like, wow, that was amazing, to when they get into these categories, and it's just, my youngest has like an encyclopedia of Pokemons, and I am just a million times a day hearing about, well, did you know about this Pokemon, and this is how big it is, and this is how far it can jump. I'm like, okay, I love it.
Yeah, you're really lucky if the whatever their interest is also happens to be at least somewhat interesting to you. So I mean, like my older one is obsessed with the Disney movies and the Disney princesses, and so I mean that's not uncool, So I kind of jive talking to her about it and thinking about them, thinking about the villains. We do riddles a lot back and forth, like we're constantly asking each other riddles. So I mean, like it's all right, but I've always said that I have a sort of a max of like 4 hours in me per day where I can literally play, and the rest of the time with my kids has to be some kind of activity. If we're doing something, then I'm fine. Going somewhere or making something or coloring or painting, something like that, that's totally fine. But sitting, playing with dolls, watching her jump, have her explain to me for the third time why Ursula is her worst villain, and I got 4 hours per day in me.
Yeah, kids are masters of mindfulness and living in the present moment. When, adults, I also recently, as a side note, got the Waking Up app, which is the meditation app of Sam Harris. And so I've been listening to that because I am interested in meditation and mindfulness. And I just think about it. I'm like, this is such a natural practice for children to just
100%
live like that. And then it's so hard to sort of undo your mental training and the way that your brain works as an adult. And in some ways, having kids is a really good reminder to practice those things at all times, because they just live in the moment nonstop all day long.
I could not agree more. Absolutely. Yeah. So tell me about this week's agenda. We've got some really great topics.
Yeah, they're great topics. They're heavy too. So let's start with And we've had on the podcast before a debate about surrogacy. So our first topic, again, is about surrogacy. And this case has been all over the news around the world. So there's this woman, she's an American woman who lived in Alaska. Her name is McKenna West. She's a registered nurse, and she was a paid surrogate for parents in California. Their names are Nasheen Gilkar and Omar Ahmed. And so she entered into this legal arrangement to be a surrogate for these Californian parents. And in their contract, there was this stipulation that if there were major complications or if the baby had really serious health conditions, that she would agree to have an abortion. So she goes to the 20-week scan, and a pregnancy is typically 40 weeks, so this baby's half cooked, and they discovered that the baby has hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And this woman who's carrying this baby, which is not biologically hers, the parents, I believe, used their own sperm and egg, so these people who paid her are the biological parents, and she's carrying this baby, and they wanted her to have an abortion. And her, being a nurse, and also I think knowing the pregnancy is at 20 weeks. If you go and you're pregnant and you do a 20-week scan, you see a fully formed baby that just looks like a small version of a newborn. And she got cold feet about doing the abortion. And what happened, so this started back in April. She ended up fleeing to the state of Texas, where abortion is illegal, except in cases where the mother's life is at risk. And these biological parents were fighting her. They wanted her to get out of state, have this abortion. And she sort of decided, no, I can't do it. And she was also researching doctors that successfully, at this one hospital where the baby was now born, I think 3 days ago, have treated this heart syndrome in babies with a few surgeries, 100% success rate. So she's now being in Texas. She gave birth to the baby. The baby's at this hospital. I don't know whether the first surgery has happened or not, but it's total insanity. So the parents were fighting her. They wanted her to have the abortion all the way to the end of the pregnancy. They tried to get her out of Texas to force her to do it. They have since filed a restraining order. So this woman hasn't even been able to see the infant. And my understanding is she's agreed either herself or her brother would adopt this baby and take care of this baby. And now the parents this restraining order is temporary. There's going to be some sort of custody battle over this baby. And it's just absolute insanity. And there's so many moral, ethical, legal questions involved that it's hard to know where to start, and it's hard to know who to blame, because you talk to some people and they're like, I think the biological parents were right. She signed a contract. She should have done what she said she'd do in the contract. And then other people are saying these parents wanted to kill their baby up until the day it was born, and now they're trying to get custody and take control of the baby's life. How dare they? They don't deserve to have that. And who knows what's going to happen. But for me, the bottom line is that this is a case in point, as I argued in a previous episode, of why surrogacy is wrong. Like, this entire situation is a train wreck.
Yeah, it's an absolutely insane story, right? Extremely complicated. I was reading a little bit about it, sort of like preparing, the fact that she is the mom only insofar as she is the carrier of the pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
But let's say genetically is not related to the kid is an insane curveball in the whole dynamic. I think, like most people would say, well, what makes you the mom? Is it right? Like, if the roles were reversed, if the woman who gave birth had donated an egg, would she then be the mom? Right?
Yeah.
If this was like a IVF and it was hers, right? Like all these kinds of questions about who is the mother, and kind of really, really changes everything about it. To your point, the nature of the contract, And people should go back and listen to the debate. So I was, in a sense, moderating because I don't actually know where I stand on the position. Adam Zivo was on the in favor of the surrogacy, and then Amy was on the against. And it's an extremely complicated topic in and of itself. And to your point, this really highlights all the major pitfalls and risks associated with it. Um, Alaska, so the parents are from California, and the surrogate mother is from Alaska, and both of
Yeah.
those states have abortions until any time law, which is another interesting component of this, right? So if Alaska had a heartbeat bill, is that something that they could then enforce? What is the nature of the governing body in the contract? Do they state that this is by the laws of California? Is this by the domestic laws of where you're at? So I'm like, I would love to read such a contract and see. And then, of
Yeah.
course, if you choose to break the contract, there are usually terms associated with what penalties that incurs. So
Yeah.
maybe she's like, okay, fine, I owe you $100,000, $500,000, whatever, but too
Yeah.
bad, so sad. Now it's mine. So like, who knows
Yeah.
what's in there, right? It's extremely complicated, very messy.
I've seen she has this sort of coterie of lawyers, including the Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas, who are on her side. And one of the lawyers has said trying to enforce this contract that says you have to get an abortion under these circumstances is the similar argument to saying you have to kill someone if I made like a hitman contract with you. And they're saying this is not enforceable. Abortion is legal in Alaska and California, as you said, but it's about the right to choose to do it. It's not
Right.
about being forced to do it. So that's their argument is you cannot, basically she's guilty of breaching a contract, but it's not a legally enforceable contract, which I think is going to have an impact going forward on not only, this is around the world. I think millions of women will see this and they're going to be wondering, and part of me is like, this woman's a registered nurse. I think she's maybe partly to blame. Why didn't she think through the ethical ramifications? What if I ended up in this situation that she did find herself in? She obviously didn't think about it enough. But I think this is a cautionary tale for every single woman in the world who might consider surrogacy going forward is, what if I end up in this ethical, moral dilemma and I'm being threatened? These parents want all of the money back that they paid her. They filed a restraining order. It's become an enormous legal battle. She's facing financial ruin. She's had to flee across from Alaska to Texas. Those are, possibly 2 points furthest apart in America. She's a single mother with 2 kids with a job as a registered nurse. Her entire life is upended because she chose to save the life of this unborn baby who's now living. And
And then
on
exactly
the
to your
one,
point is like, one of the things in the contract is like the severity of the condition, right, of the intrauterine baby. Like,
yeah,
if the baby had a profound, I don't know, spina bifida, if it was born with, missing lobes of the brain, if it was anencephalic, like maybe those are the kinds of things that she thought would kind of qualify. So I'd love to know what it is that qualifies for, under these conditions, you would pursue an
yeah,
abortion versus not. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome, and I'm like, my neonatology at one point was reasonable. It's not nearly as strong as it once was, but it is a very serious condition. And of
yeah,
course, medical breakthroughs and like surgical experts today probably have a much different management plan than what I know. But it was a very serious, very poor prognosis kind of condition. But it was sort of treatable into adulthood,
right,
in some ways, and some cases. But like, does that suffice to disqualify the terms for pursuing an abortion? Like, who knows, right?
yeah,
And not just like, who knows, you and I, but would they know? Whatever lawyer drafted the contract know? So
yeah,
there's just so many if thens. There are so many qualifications that it's very hard to imagine you're going to have like a perfectly worded contract that you would be now kind of fighting over. And then to your point about forcing someone to take a life, is this like an illegal act? And how and when is it an illegal act? to try and force somebody to do something that, they find so morally objectionable. Who know? Yeah,
Yeah.
really nasty case. Very difficult.
You know what also is fascinating about it, and I haven't really seen media talking about this, but just the fact that she fled to Texas, number one, because of the abortion laws there. But number two, think of the correlation between the fact that this is a state that criminalizes abortion, but it also happens to be the state where all of the experts who have a 100% success rate and are doing the best at treating this heart
That's a
condition
good point.
is where
Yep.
they exist. Like, why do you
Yep.
think
Great
that
point.
is? That can't
Yep.
be by chance, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
it goes back to one of the things that we've talked about a lot, where these are the sort of the, I don't want to say unintended consequences, because they may very well be intended, but these are some of the second order, third order consequences of some kind of policy, right? So in Canada, where we have a MAID program, and suddenly the number of people with ALS is going to collapse, and people are seeking, euthanasia as a consequence of a diagnosis. Well, why would we ever think that Canada is going to be a pioneer on ALS research? And so
Yeah.
it's exactly the same thing now here in
Yeah.
Texas, where they basically stop you from having an abortion. And then you are giving birth to children who are much more challenged. Well, all of a sudden, the neonatal teams, they are like the best in the world. So,
Yeah.
right, like these are second order, third order consequences of policy decisions. And it's a really great point. Yeah. Very complicated
Yeah.
case. I wish her and the baby the very best. The medical component of it, the legal component of it, the firestorm online about it. This is a horrendous situation to be in for everyone involved.
It is terrible. And, at the center of it is this baby who will have this record on the internet forever of the biological parents wanting the baby to be aborted up until the day, I think it's a little boy, until he was born. And then a birth mother, not biologically related, fighting for his life. And we don't know yet who's going to end up having this baby. So it's... I'm sure there's going to be a movie about this one day. It's so insane.
Yep. Yeah. The truth is stranger than fiction. These kinds of stories is very hard for somebody to come up with.
Yeah.
So this is one of the medical legal kind of touchstones. What's our next one?
Okay, so the next one is also huge. So this is about a U.S. lawsuit, and this is the Federal Trade Commission. So they, or also known as the FTC, they have sued WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And WPATH has been sort of the de facto leader in setting trans care guidelines around the world, including in Canada. All of the health authorities, as far as I know, in Canada, follow WPATH guidelines for trans care. And the latest version of their guidelines, which is called SOC 8, removed all age restrictions from their guidelines. And so the FTC, along with the states of Alaska, Iowa, Nebraska, and Texas, filed this lawsuit. It's interesting because it's from this consumer protection angle. So it's not like a detrans lawsuit. It's not against, like someone specifically who was harmed. It's the FTC saying that you have been lying. You've made false, misleading, and unsubstantiated claims regarding the safety, necessity, and effectiveness of pediatric medical transition services. So this was filed in June. WPATH has since filed a motion to dismiss. And in their motion to dismiss, there are lots of gems because it's basically put them into this sort of tactical retreat. Whereas before, they were all about there's no debate on this healthcare. You do it or these people will kill themselves. You have to do this. Anyone who says that you're not going to follow our guidelines is a bigot. And now in this court filing where they're asking for a motion to dismiss, they're saying, well, we're just stating our medical opinion in an intense medical debate. We're just presenting what we believe is the best evidence to the doctors who then have to interpret the evidence, make their own decisions, and whatever they do falls on them. It doesn't fall on us. That's basically it. They're arguing they have First Amendment rights that protects their speech, and that harms that occurred would basically fall on physicians and not on them. So it's really, really gratifying in a way to see, as someone who's been speaking out, to see them finally admit, yeah, you know what I'm saying is not the verbatim, uncontestable, no debate truth. They're like, yeah, this is a contentious debate and I'm just one side of it.
Yes. So when I was looking through this, it's great. So this is where I think everyone on this issue kind of would want the battle to focus on, right? I think that this is like the tipping point. So it is the FEC, that's a federal agency, but then there's also, I think, 3 or 4 states that are also part of this, which is great because one of the defenses from the WPATH is that this is not a federal issue. The healthcare is a state issue. So if there's an issue, then it should be by the states. That's a pretty weak argument because there are literal state parties involved. So,
Yeah.
okay, apart from that, the WPATH is, let's say, the foundation of the vast majority, the overwhelming evidence that supports this movement, right? So it's very, very few institutions that have independently, outside of influence from the WPATH, have come to the conclusion that transitioning children with quote unquote gender affirming care is a reasonable option. There are, but they're very few. And the WPATH has been absolutely critical to that. So having this level of the research, let's say, being challenged in court is fantastic news in
Yeah.
either direction, right?
Yeah.
If they are spared any negligence, right, then or liability, then good for them. And if they are not, if they're found culpable, then also great for the other side. So it's a great contest to be having. If
I
we
think it's
steel
a.
man both positions,
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
have to give the what's it called, the WPATH,
Yeah.
it's fair shake because if they say that this is opinion, and if it is found to be just opinion, then yeah, good enough. If their evidence is these are our medical opinions and these are just a group of people who are coming to it, in good faith, then good for them. I don't think that makes a lot of sense based on what I know, right?
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
devil's going to be really in the details. How did you
Yeah.
market this? How did you present yourselves?
Well, and I know because when I was looking into this, I thought I've got to check out the public press releases WPATH has done over the years because I think it's in direct contradiction to what they're saying in their motion to dismiss. And so I've gone on their website and they still have, they're making this argument partly why it should be dismissed, like number one, First Amendment rights, which I think they might win on, the free speech issue. But they're also making an argument that this lawsuit by the FTC violates principles of federalism in the US, where each state has the authority to legislate their own health care. And they're saying if you allow this lawsuit to go forward, you're violating the principles of federalism. But if you go on the WPATH website, you'll see that they have these strong letters of absolute condemnation. And they use those words. They're like, we utterly, absolutely condemn the state of Texas or whatever for not following our guidelines on pediatric gender affirming care. So they're on the one hand pretending to respect federalism to get their lawsuit dismissed, and on the other hand, they're condemning outright and engaging in activist language and behavior to try to pressure states and regulators and lawmakers to not make the laws that they're then turning around and being like, well, they have the right to do this. So which is it? And I,
Right.
Basically they're hypocrites, and that's
I
not
think that it's
surprising
going to
to
come down to
me.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's like the question is how hypocritical are they? So you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. So the nature of them as an organization is going to play a role, right? Are they an activist group? Are they a nonprofit group? Do they market themselves, or are they incorporated as some kind of medical body? That would be one thing, right? Are these guidelines that they're putting forward? Are they influencing or commenting on guidelines? Or are these position statements? It's just this is my position. Because if that was the case, then like ACUITY could have a position statement on anything, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, yeah, we're a medical legal firm, but that being said, like we're just a medical legal firm. We're not a college, right? We're not like
Yeah.
an authoritative body of researchers. So like the devil will be in the details.
Yeah.
I just know, sort of colloquially, that they have been instrumental in this fight, and they could distance themselves from being directly involved, but just in terms of their impact, the impact has been so massive. It's really
Yeah.
hard to know that they're going to be able to mount some kind of defense. That they're not going to have press statements, articles, website links, et cetera, that are going to be putting them in the light of like we are suggesting that we are an authoritative research body, and whether or not this is medical opinion or whether this is meta-analysis or whatever the quality of the medical opinion is, you're putting it out there as an authority on this subject. And so, therefore, if you have been purposefully misleading, you cannot pretend like, oh, I'm just talking about my opinion. This is like the Candace
Yeah.
Owens, Tucker Carlson. I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, you can say that, but
Yeah.
at some point, you're not just asking questions. So the
Yeah.
devil will be in the details. Yeah,
That
but
is a
really
very
interesting
good
case. We'll have to see how this
comparison.
goes.
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks, having read the filing, that they do have a strong free speech case. But then at the same time, I think they've been such weasels by sort of protecting themselves by enshrining their organization in this nonprofit category, while at the same time, we know, working in healthcare, that they are not just considered a nonprofit, they're considered the global leading experts on telling every doctor exactly what to do in trans healthcare. And they even quote in their motion to dismiss several countries that use their guidelines, and including Canada, of course, which
So there you
is a
go. I mean, like
huge embarrassment.
that's pretty bad, right? Like
Yeah,
if you're bragging about how people reference you,
yeah,
I mean, you can't suddenly just say, "Is your opinion this is free speech?" Because, like, free speech, and we've thought about this a lot, and it will come up repeatedly, basically forever. So we can say that we are free speech absolutists. I am as close as you can get without being a free speech absolutist. So
okay,
I cannot come here and tell people, "Hey, you know what? You should be investing in Canadian bonds because this is what the market looks like." Because I'm not a financial advisor, right? So there's a limit to the kinds of speech that you can give to mass amounts of people outside of a personal setting, and so on and so on. So if WPATH pretends to be something of medical experts giving medical advice to other organizations, institutions, countries, whatever, governments, well then you suddenly can't pretend, oh, I'm just giving an opinion and you can take it or leave it.
yeah,
No, you're coming at it with a very specific presentation, right? And
yeah,
that is the misleading component that the FTC is alleging. So, I mean, great battle to have. I hope
yeah,
that there's some kind of sense of conclusion from it, a legitimate conclusion, because the biggest disservice will be if there's a changing of administration and this has not finalized, and the FTC stops, or within the states, right? I mean, like Alaska or Ohio or Iowa or whatever decides to have a change and like, okay, we're no longer going to be interveners or a party involved. So I hope there's like an appropriate conclusion to this.
I hope so. My ultimate take is that no matter what happens, I still am going to consider it a win because it's put them on their back feet. Like I said, it's a tactical retreat where they've had to admit that there actually is a debate going on. And I think it's revealed who they are. When I said it's gratifying, in part, it's like seeing them make the same argument that their detractors have made about, hey, you might disagree with us, but the solution isn't to censor us. The solution is to counter us with more speech. And it's like, how absolutely ironic that you
Yeah,
come
it's
to the
great.
table with that debate only at the moment when the script has been flipped on you because of Trump, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
you're now finally facing sort of the same consequence that you have meted out to all of your detractors for years and years and years. And now you pretend to care about free speech, free expression, open debate. But I think, even if they win this dismissal, they get the case tossed out, they've just so undone their reputation by the
It's
words
true.
that they've
This
said
is a
in this
victory.
motion to dismiss. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for me,
So I encourage
victory
everybody
either
who's
way.
really interested on this topic, go and check out Michael Schellenberger. He's uh, I guess he's part of the Free Press, but he also does a lot of independent work, and he has a fantastic series of posts on Twitter and YouTube videos on the exposing the WPATH files, and that's where all of this kind of kickstarted. So go and appreciate his work because it's absolutely fantastic. The journalism that he and his team have done on this is fantastic, and the house of cards is crumbling as a consequence of that. So good job to him.
Yeah, bit by bit, this crumbling edifice will just collapse. Okay, our next topic, again, with medical legal ramifications. It's a little weird because it's a really dark topic, but I want to focus on one specific aspect of it, and this is the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. So
I really hate
Lindsay,
this story. This story just
yeah,
really, really kills me. Yeah, I really find it very hard.
it's terrible. Yeah, I'm sure everybody knows, but just in case they don't, I'll just say so. Lindsay Clancy is on trial right now to determine whether or not she was criminally responsible for murdering her three children: Cora, 5 years old; Dawson, 3 years old; and Callan, 8 months old. This was in January of 2023. And so this young mother had psychiatric problems, and she was under the care of a psychiatrist, a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and others. She was married. One day she sent her husband out to do some errands, and while he was out of the house, she strangled all three of the children to death in the basement and then jumped out of a window in an apparent suicide attempt. He came home, he found her in the yard, called 911, and at some point when paramedics were there, he's like, I gotta go check on the kids, who she had said were in the basement. And then he goes into the basement. He's still on the phone with 911 operators and realizes that all three of his children had been murdered. And it's unfathomable how terrible it is. It's really hard to stomach any of this. And so now she admits to killing the children. And now the issue is whether or not she'll sort of spend the rest of her life in a regular prison or in a psychiatric institute, because if she's determined that she wasn't criminally responsible because of postpartum psychosis, then perhaps her sentencing will look different. She might even end up getting out of prison if she ends up being found not criminally responsible for being psychotic at the time. Absolutely horrible. But what I wanted to focus on this week is how over the last week, the defense has been bringing in her psychiatrist, and they're trying to establish that she had poor psychiatric care. So she has really good lawyers, and they're just grilling all of the psychiatrists. This nurse practitioner was on the stand for a while. They're getting absolutely grilled and excoriated, as a good defense lawyer would do. But there's this one moment where Lindsay's former psychiatrist her name is Dr. Tufts, and she's reading out some of her charting in the courtroom. And maybe Mark can pull up the video. We have to watch it. And this has led to so much reaction online. It's just causing so many people who work in healthcare, whether it's doctors or nurses, to sort of weigh in on how it makes them feel about the profession and about their charting and what they thought they would need to do. I've seen psychiatrists saying, I don't even want to be in the profession anymore after watching this testimony. Here we go.
Pressured speech. You said in the medical record, pressured speech.
I don't care what it says. I know what I meant.
Does it say that?
Not hyper, comma, pressured speech.
Right.
The two are
what
following
does a
the
comma mean
not.
to you? When you put down in a medical record, not hyper, comma, pressured speech. That's what you wrote, right?
She did not have
Did
pressured
you write
speech.
that, doctor?
I wrote that, but you're misinterpreting my note.
So
Yeah,
I would have
believe her.
to ask you.
Yeah, I don't believe her.
You don't believe her?
No, because I think that would be very strange notation. I think probably the clearest notation would be not hyper and then semicolon, pressured speech. So a semicolon would say that it's not hyper, but it is pressured speech.
Okay.
That's one option. The other one that I would use is I would put a slash, not hyper slash pressured, if I meant not hyper and not pressured speech. So the comma to me seems to suggest it's not hyper speech, it is pressured speech.
Okay.
Now, I don't know about the importance of that with respect to the case, but I thought that her defense, I know what that means. I would argue that if you looked at 50 other charts of hers, she would not use that notation if that's what she meant. So I found that not particularly credible at all.
That's interesting because I sort of had the opposite reaction from having worked in psychiatry for so long. When I initially saw that, I would have interpreted that as a psychiatrist saying not hyperspeech, not pressured speech.
Sure.
And that they probably should have used a slash, but they didn't. Because my interpretation was, oh, they would have said not hyperspeech, but speech is pressured or something like that. So I had
There's
the opposite
way clearer ways.
interpretation.
Yeah, there's way clearer ways. I mean, like, that's not particularly clear.
Yeah.
But to your point about what it is that we pick up from that, you know, you might write or, not hyper or pressured speech, right? You know,
Yeah.
so there's like
Yeah.
way more clarifying ways to have written it. My instinct is to not believe her. But
Yeah.
to your point, I mean, like, maybe you look at 50 of her charts and she always writes that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's also psychiatry is so different from the area of medicine that you practice as well.
Yeah,
And
totally. Yeah,
which
yeah, totally.
Also, it shouldn't be an excuse for being sloppy with your grammar, because grammar can drastically change the meaning of what
100%.
you write.
That Oxford comma, you know, like all those famous examples of that Oxford comma, right? Can I ask you, I have not seen any postpartum psychosis. I've seen quite a lot of postpartum depression. I think that's like, you know, a lot more common. Postpartum quote unquote blues, where people are like quite sad, you know, maybe a little bit more morose or despondent, but maybe not fully qualifying as a full-on depression, you know, like tons and tons of that. But I've seen like inpatient care in the psychiatric facility for postpartum depression. And that was, that's alarming. That was like a very legitimate, a very serious disease state to be in. And in the instance that I recall, that was a patient who had no prior instances of like depression or anything like that. Like this was completely novel. But I've never seen a case of postpartum psychosis. Psychosis are bad diseases, but I don't know if this is how prevalent, you know, in a sense, how quote unquote real, how likely.
Yeah. So I spent 13 years doing various, mostly inpatient psychiatry. And I would say over that, I can remember 3 times of seeing postpartum psychosis. And my memory of that times was that the women who were experiencing it, I didn't see anyone who wanted to harm their babies. I saw one woman who had intrusive thoughts about wanting to harm the baby, but she was so horrified by them that she immediately expressed them and brought herself to hospital because she was so scared of what was happening and she didn't want to harm the child. So this Lindsay Clancy issue, to me, my personal take is I've never seen anything like that, and it seemed to me to be very calculated, the way that she was able to be organized enough throughout the day to be texting with her friends, which I think was shown in court, texting with her husband, sending him out for errands, and then sending him out to get food to sort of keep him out of the home even longer to do this. So just from the few facts that I know, it doesn't fit with what I've seen from postpartum psychosis, because when people are actively psychotic, they're really not able to sort of put up a front and organize their day like that, or send someone who knows them more than their husband, who knows them more than anyone else in the world, to make them go out and do things and not be able to detect that something is seriously wrong. It doesn't make sense to me, to be honest.
That's where I fall on it. That's totally where I fall on it, because I mean, like, I've seen, you know, huge amounts of schizophrenia, right?
Yeah.
And like we see it all the time in the emergency department, people off their meds and they don't have insight and they deteriorate and so on and so on. And I mean, when those people come in, the number of such people that I've seen who have hurt other people as a consequence of their psychosis is spectacularly rare.
Yeah.
Spectacularly rare. So that's not to suggest that they have insight enough to not. It just means that the nature of their hallucinations, psychosis, delusions, it just doesn't take them there. So the idea that, and those people are all very, very mentally unwell, and they don't get to that stage. So the idea that you have sort of so much preserved, or that it's fluctuating in that course, doesn't sound right to me. That seems a little incongruent. But I will say, from a legal point of view,
when you look at the Lapu Lapu Day massacre in Vancouver, which was a man with schizophrenia, and he drove his car into a crowd, he killed, I don't remember the total number, and you see his family, who was close to him at the time in the days leading up to this, and even the day of this mass murder, were calling the mental health team. They were pleading for help. They saw how unwell he was, and they were afraid of what he would do in his behavior.
Yeah.
He wasn't, putting on this phase, oh, hey, you guys, no worries, I'm going out, I'm doing this. He wasn't able to hide or mask the florid psychosis that he was experiencing.
Exactly. That's exactly my impression. Now, from the legal point of view, there was like a pretty famous criminal law case, and Amy, you may know about this just from like the regular world. But this woman, in the middle of the night, woke up in a sleepwalking state, drove to her parents' house some 120 kilometers away, and killed her parents, and then drove back. And she was ultimately caught and arrested and prosecuted. And the defense that she mounted was the state of like being a quote unquote automaton. She was in some kind of automaton state, and that succeeded. And the thing that made it succeed was the degree of despondency that she exhibited and how credible she was. She was absolutely devastated. She was emotionally, psychologically, physically catastrophe as a consequence of having done this. It was completely manifest, and so people believed it. Now, in this case, as I understand it, this woman attempts to commit suicide, jumps outside a window, and is now some kind of like paraplegic, quadriplegic, something along those lines. I don't know, hemiparetic, I don't know. But I mean, that's not the kind of thing that people just do willy-nilly. You know what I mean? Like, that is an outrageous effort in order to try and hide your the criminal behavior, right? Yeah. So that I found was by far the most compelling component of the evidence in her favor. But again, to your point, the timeline doesn't really match.
Yeah, she had superficial cuts on her neck and wrists as well, which you see sometimes with people who don't have genuine sort of suicide attempts if they're actually making what we call in medicine parasuicidal attempts, where it's more of an attention-seeking behavior. And so that was something that's also stuck out to me was,
I did not know that.
If you do something so heinous that you're going to kill yourself afterwards, and you can only manage to do little small cuts before you jump out a window, which is maybe a bit easier to do than doing sort of deep cuts that are required. I think it's difficult for people to do that unless they're seriously suicidal. So that also puts a lot of doubt into my mind
Agreed.
Yeah.
Interesting. You see, like that, and I once again, I'll just put out the caveat there. Amy has a lot of experience in this world. I have no problem admitting that I do not, but the experience that I have had, the education that I have had, this seems much more of a suspicious story. I have a tremendous amount when, I did not know about this, but when I first heard about this story, I thought to myself, like, man, I've always been told that postpartum psychosis is terrible and it can be like a horrendous state and so on. So I had a lot of sympathy for that. And, anybody who has kids, who's seen their partner go through that, that it takes a huge toll on women. That is not an easy place to be, my God, right? That being said, this fact pattern really doesn't quite fit. Not for me anyway. No,
I agree. It's pretty horrifying. And I think, this got a lot darker than the charting issue, but sort of maybe Mark can throw in one of these reels where there have been so many psychiatrists that are like, me, people do reels and they have the superimposed text and they're like, me rethinking my entire career choice after watching the Lindsay Clancy trial, or they'll be like me charting on my patient afterwards, and then they just sit there typing out this elaborate note like patient had a half a banana, and then I asked them this, quote that. Like, they're terrified of doing any sort of charting because of how much the psychiatrists are taking it. And so on the one hand, I feel bad for this psychiatrist who's really being grilled, and it's like this woman's already admitted to killing her kids, but at the same time, it's like you gotta always, and we deal with this world all the time, like
we do
have to chart properly.
Exactly. My charting has to be a certain way, and from the legal side, we look for these errors. So, and they
that's why they will be capitalized upon. If you fuck up and it ends up in court, they're gonna hone in on that.
Yeah, I mean,
You
like
always have to be
charting is a
vigilant.
whole conversation to have, and it's a worthwhile conversation to have because like there's charting fulfills many functions, right? So one of them is a reminder to you. One of them is a note to anyone else who's reading your contemporaneous assessment. One of them is to other members of your team who are reading it, like in acute care of that same patient. One of them is for medical legal reasons. You never know what's going to happen. The number of medical legal reasons is very large, right? Like
Yeah.
you could be sued, something could happen to the patient. It might not be about your care at all. It might be somebody else down the road that your note is going to be compared against, et cetera, et cetera. So, charting is incredibly valuable. It's very important. So yeah, I mean, like I have some sympathy for this person because there's basically no way that she was taking this as seriously as with a foreknowledge that something like this could happen, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
clear. But I mean, that's the nature of the job. It's like saying it sucks that electricians can get zapped, but like you're an
Yeah.
electrician, bro. This
Yeah.
is exactly what you're up to. So
She got zapped. That's like you let your guard down, you get zapped.
Yeah.
She got zapped.
So let's conclude with a nice moment of levity. So are we going to get the picture side of this? If not, that's okay.
That's okay too.
Yeah. So moment of levity. People are really digging the soundtrack. I like those comments that I saw after our James
Yeah.
Lindsay conversation.
Yeah.
And it happens to be on one of my favorite topics, and it's also a little closer to home this time.
Yes. And maybe Mark can pull up the website. Love is Blind, one of our favorite reality TV shows, is coming to Canada. Brilliant.
Hooray!
They're looking for
okay.
people to apply now.
Can I ask you? Okay, so that this is in Canada is a much greater impetus for me to watch. I've seen lots of clips of the previous seasons. I've never sat and watched the whole season. I've watched parts of episodes when my wife is.
Sacrilege.
So it's a good show, but it's just like I got too much. So there's only so much that I can do. But I want to did you watch Canada Shore?
That was one that I me and my boyfriend watched a little bit, and then we thought this is just too. It was like Toronto white trash, too much. Yeah. I'm like, I can't handle this. It's too much for me.
But the fact that there was like one girl from Halifax, Halifax area, one girl who was like from New Brunswick but spends a lot of time in Halifax, that was enough to hook me, and I really wanted to see it. So I really hope that there's someone on this who is cast for Love is Blind Canada that's like a friend of a friend. I don't want to know them particularly personally, right? It's too much, it's too close. But like a friend of a friend would be kind of nice, or somebody I've known, a long time ago would just make this so amazing.
I'm the opposite. I'm like, I hope I hope my ex-boyfriend, maybe my ex-husband. I would love to see them on this show. I would love it.
Okay, an ex-girlfriend would be fantastic. Like that would be fantastic. Yeah. You're totally right.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be a coworker.
Someone I know is thinking of applying, and I tried to encourage her, and she's like a really sweet-hearted person who would obviously be going in with the right intentions, and that's what I struggle with Love is Blind. So the premise is that you want to get married, and you go in and you speak to these people, sort of speed dating with a wall between you. You can't see them. And after however many weeks, you can decide whether or not to get engaged. And then you meet in real life, you meet each other's families, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, you have to go through with a wedding or not. And I think that the show attracts either people who are actually interested in marriage or people who are interested in social media influencer status. And it's hard to tell sometimes during the recording who is what exactly. It always becomes clear at some point.
Full game. Yeah, that's the whole great thing about it, right? And it's the same thing with Love Island. That's why they always make the reference, right? This is Love Island, not Friendship Island, like not Party Island, et cetera, et cetera. Because trying to put the emphasis on the fact that you are allegedly seeking love, right? You are allegedly going down the path of marriage. Adds a stake that, people will play with in game and the audience is going to be sort of hinging on. So I like all that. So this is a great topic. I want to conclude with a very specific question. Is love blind?
No, it's really not.
It's not.
You know,
I agree. Like, how could it possibly be, right? I mean, yeah. I mean, I will say that it doesn't have to be as, there doesn't have to be as much, superficial chemistry or, like aesthetic appreciation, admiration as, like some people might think. You don't have to sort of see someone and be like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then that's the person for you. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Chemistry builds over time. It changes over time and so on. But there has to be some kind of physical appreciation there in order for love to continue.
I've experienced that where it's someone who maybe isn't your normal type. Women have types more than men do. And you're like, it's not horrible, but they have a lot of redeeming qualities. And then they really grow on you until you find them attractive. And then if you were to experience that attraction for having first met them, it wouldn't make sense to you. It's irrational. But it definitely can grow. But, to an extent. There are deal breakers in terms of.
So let's hope that we find. Let's hope that we find exes on this show, or at least maybe audition tapes come out for them having tried to get on it. Because that
maybe
would
one of Mark's exes. Can you imagine?
I think Mark is a. I think Mark is a good. The number of exes.
I would never know. I would never watch that show. The only way that Love is Blind, like I always said to Leanne, the only way that Love is Blind could ever be interesting is if all the contestants were actually blind.
So on that note, let us know what you guys think about Is Love Blind? Let me know if anyone out there is trying to get on Love is Blind Canada, because we'd love to hear from you and your motivations and interests. So please message us. And of course, like, subscribe, follow, retweet, whatever it is. But really get at us in the comments and let us know what you want us to talk about in the future. And we are so grateful that you have listened once again. Thanks a lot this week.
My friends, let us consider that acuity is the refined clarity of thought and perception which enables one to discern subtle truths.